The story begins on a dark and rainy night, setting the perfect mood for something mysterious. Inside the building, a man walks slowly down a hallway, his steps echoing in the silence. He stops before a door, pausing as if gathering his thoughts. Taking a deep breath, he seems to steel himself for what lies ahead. Looking at the CCTV, he introduces himself as Seongjin Kim, a researcher from Kita. He reflects on the unexpected turn of events, never imagining he would be given a body search by an NIS agent, indicating the high interest in his project from the higher-ups. Seongjin Kim is thoroughly searched by agents, who confirm he is clean and send him in. The door creaks open, revealing the darkness beyond. Seongjin Kim steps inside, his heart pounding with anticipation. Inside the room, 3 figures sit in the dark, their identities shrouded in mystery. Seongjin gulps, sweating nervously as he takes in the scene. He looks around, identifying the figures as the brain behind the president, Professor Seok Tae-han. Next, he recognizes the president's right-hand man, General Yang Kyun-chae. Finally, he sees the man who elected 3 presidents, the Kingmaker, Minister Young Yeol-yoon. Seongjin is in awe, never imagining he would meet these influential figures in person. Minister Young Yeol-yoon, the Kingmaker, wasted no time and got straight to business. Seongjin Kim, still in awe, could only manage a nervous affirmation. Seongjin began the briefing, explaining that the shipment was found adrift in prohibited waters near Sokcho. The search team sent to investigate the ship was attacked and wiped out. The minister abruptly stopped the briefing, asking to see the video Seongjin had prepared. Seongjin complied, ready to show them the footage. He introduced it as footage of a great discovery, an event never before reported in world history. The video began to play, revealing chaotic scenes of soldiers firing their weapons. A terrifying screech echoed through the footage, sending chills down the spines of the viewers. The 3 influential figures watched in horror as the events unfolded on screen. The minister couldn't help but exclaim in shock. Seongjin explained that for convenience, they decided to refer to the creatures as zombies. The project was named after the ship they were found on, Zombie Apocalypse 8208. 3 months ago, in a small army restaurant, the atmosphere was lively. Food sizzled on the grill as orders were shouted back and forth. The restaurant buzzed with activity, with customers calling out their orders. The TV in the background broadcasted breaking news about a large explosion in Apchnaya, a Georgian city bordering Russia, with parts of Adler also caught in the flames. A group of men gathered around a table, raising their glasses in a toast, expressing gratitude to Brother Mingu and vowing to return safely. Laughter and jeers filled the air as they poked fun at the idea of military service, suggesting prison might be an easier alternative. With no excuses left, they called for Brother Mingu to lead them in a toast, filling their cups to the brim. Sheriff sat at another table, annoyed by the loud commotion, questioning if he should intervene and teach them a lesson. Yubin arrived, announcing their purpose was to send Jinu off to the army, urging everyone to ignore the rowdy group. Samshik warned Sheriff that any trouble would mean serious consequences for Jinu, who perked up at the possibility of avoiding enlistment. Sheriff firmly declared that Jinu would enlist no matter what, while Samshik jokingly shared a grotesque rumor about military life. Jinu, visibly disgusted, suggested pretending to eat it if such a situation ever arose. Jinu scolded Samshik for bringing up such a topic during a meal, but Samshik quickly changed the subject to a pink punch. Everyone's attention shifted as they heard a catchy tune from the television. The television played a song about love and kisses, capturing the interest of the group. Jinu dramatically declared his intention to protect the country and Tara with his life, sparking a debate between Sheriff and Yubin over who was prettier. Sheriff argued that Jenny's charm lay in her sexiness, a comment that did not sit well with Yubin. Sheriff turned to Samshik, asking who he liked better, putting him on the spot. Samshik, with a smile, diplomatically declared that he liked them both, avoiding any potential conflict. Suddenly, both the glass and Sheriff's voice shattered the calm, declaring something was painfully obvious. Their conversation was abruptly interrupted by a loud argument from the restaurant, with a gangster yelling about someone's questionable actions. A gangster demanded answers about his brother's shirt, while a terrified waiter apologized profusely, offering to pay for the cleaning costs. The gangster accused the waiter of killing their buzz and demanded to know what she was going to do about it, leaving her stammering helplessly. The gangster licked his tongue like a snake, smirking as he called it a great question. He grabbed the waiter, telling her to come sit with him, leaving her confused and frightened. Just as the gangster made his move, his hand was suddenly grabbed. It was Sheriff, and the gangster wasted no time asking who this punk was. Sheriff declared that was enough, stating it was a public place, but the gangster wasn't having it. The gangster slapped Sheriff's face, mocking him for thinking he was some kind of movie star. He sneered that life wasn't that easy, but Sheriff had other plans before the gangster could finish. Sheriff recovered and punched him in the stomach. The punch was devastating, and the gangster lost consciousness immediately. All he could muster was a weak groan, while Mingu stayed silent, observing the scene. The other gangsters jumped up from their seats, shocked and calling out to their brother. A buff gangster approached Sheriff with a towering presence, demanding if he had any idea what he had just done. Sheriff stood his ground, barely flinching, as he questioned whether he even needed to care about the gangster's threats. The gangsters rose from their seats, ready to brawl, clearly not fans of Sheriff's attitude. Sheriff's friends exchanged worried glances, debating whether he could handle this many thugs, even with his pro-taekwondo background. Mingu stepped in, shutting down the gangsters, calling them out for ganging up on a kid and embarrassing themselves. Mingu casually took off his suit coat, signaling he was about to handle this personally. Mingu approached Sheriff, calmly stating that they needed to settle this. Mingu smirked, asking if Sheriff had any last words, to which Sheriff simply replied he had just two. Before Mingu could react, Sheriff lunged forward, throwing the first punch. Sheriff shouted, aiming a strike, but Mingu was ready. Sheriff's eyes widened in surprise as Mingu effortlessly dodged his attack. Sheriff barely had time to process how Mingu dodged without even breaking a sweat. In a flash, Mingu grabbed Sheriff, his grip firm and unyielding. With a swift motion, Mingu pinned Sheriff to the ground, ending the fight before it truly began. Mingu threw a powerful punch, clearly aiming to end things quickly, but Mingu got surprised as Sheriff countered from the ground. Sheriff threw a counterattack while still pinned down, catching Mingu off guard. Mingu barely dodged, tilting his head back just in time, disbelief written all over his face. From that position, Mingu jumped back, putting some distance between them. Mingu glared, clearly not expecting such a move from Sheriff. He reached for a beer bottle, his eyes locked on Sheriff. They glared at each other, tension thick enough to cut with a knife. The next one, both seemed to think. Both pulled back their hands, ready to attack again, clearly aiming to settle things once and for all. But just as they were about to clash, a siren blared nearby, making both flinch and stop inches from each other. A police car was approaching, its siren getting louder. One of the gangsters yelled at Mingu, telling him it was time to leave because the cops were coming. Mingu turned away, throwing a parting threat that next time they meet, he would kill Sheriff. Sheriff, not one to back down, shouted back that Mingu should speak for himself and that he would be the one doing the killing next time. Yubin called out to Sheriff, asking if he was all right. Sheriff, with blood dripping from his nose, turned to his friends and gave them a thumbs up, saying he was fine. Yubin pointed out the obvious about Sheriff's nose. Meanwhile, the gangsters drove away, leaving the scene behind. As the gangsters drove away, one of them wondered if they should run a background check on that kid they encountered. Mingu sat in silence, contemplating the recent events. He decided to let it go, pushing the thought out of his mind. The bruised Sheriff left throbbed, a reminder of their encounter. Mingu muttered about fate, wondering if they would meet again. Jinu stood in front of the Korean Army Training Center, thanking his friends for seeing him off. The group of friends gathered, hugging each other and saying their farewells. Sheriff reminded Jinu to prioritize safety, while Yubin joked about making sure he exercised. Samshik joked about not calling if he had to pay for it, but then suggested they go to the beach when Jinu was on leave. Yubin assured Jinu that he didn't have to do anything, while Sheriff promised they would work hard to pay for the trip. Jinu smiled, remembering the promise they made, and bid them farewell. Sheriff reflected that they never ended up going to the beach. The scene shifted to the coast of Sokcho 3 months later. A boat traveled along the coast, the waves gently lapping against its hull. Just a few days before his first vacation, the Coast Guard spotlighted a suspicious boat. They issued a warning, suspecting illegal fishery and invasion of territorial waters. The Coast Guard demanded all crew members to be on deck immediately, issuing yet another warning to the suspicious vessel. Sheriff muttered about the world turning into hell as the boat, number 8208, faced the Coast Guard's warnings. The Coast Guard team pondered their next move, staring at the seemingly abandoned boat. Capturing it seemed like the obvious choice, but something felt off. Following protocol, they decided to search the boat first. Orders were given, and the team sprang into action. Hooks were thrown, securing the mysterious vessel. The team prepared to board, tension hanging in the air like a bad Wi-Fi signal. With the hooks secure, the Coast Guard members readied themselves. The boat was now within their grasp. Literally, the recon team landed on the boat and began their search. They radioed in, announcing their entry, voices steady but alert. Carefully, they combed through the boat, their movements precise and methodical. The search had officially begun. The cabin was cleared, and the team reported back. So far, so good, but the night was young, and so was their luck. Orders came through to search the storage below deck. The team acknowledged, ready to dive deeper into the boat's mysteries. One of the team members removed his helmet, complaining about the heat. Night operations were never fun, especially when the boat's origin was as mysterious as a plot twist in a bad movie. The team wondered aloud about the boat's origin. It was like trying to solve a puzzle with half the pieces missing. Sergeant Kim took the lead, opening a door that led downward. His team called out, asking if he saw anything. With a flashlight in hand, Sergeant Kim scanned the area. At first glance, it seemed empty, but appearances could be deceiving. Suddenly, something caught his attention. His surprise was palpable, like finding a spider in your shoe. Before he could react, a zombie lunged at him. It was the kind of surprise no one ever wanted. The sergeant's scream echoed through the boat, drawing the attention of his team. The night had just taken a turn for the worse, and by worse, it meant zombie worse. The team rushed to him, their voices echoing with panic and confusion. They struggled to comprehend what was happening but knew they had to pull him up. With a collective effort, they managed to pull him up, urgency driving their actions. Surprise and confusion gripped them as they saw the state he was in. They called out to Sergeant Kim, their voices filled with shock and disbelief. The zombie was relentless, its attacks brutal and unyielding. One of the members swung hard with his gun, determined to save his comrade. With a powerful strike, he managed to knock the zombie off the sergeant. But the sergeant was heavily injured, his condition dire. The sergeant continued to scream in agony, his pain evident to all. Gradually, his screams subsided, settling into a low groan. The recon team pointed their guns at the zombie, ready to respond. The zombie growled at them, its intent clear and menacing. The team couldn't believe what they were seeing. Their disbelief palpable, the zombie tilted its head, its actions eerie and unsettling. The recon team was utterly confused, their confusion growing by the second. As the recon team stood there, utterly confused, the zombie suddenly rushed at them. A loud bang echoed over the ocean as the soldiers started shooting at the zombie. But the zombie didn't stop. It rushed forward with a screeching voice. The zombie bit one of the soldiers, making him yell out in pain. Then, the zombie was shot right in the head. The recon team that was attacked stood frozen in stunned silence. The zombie lay dead. The gun smoke settled. The shooter asked if everyone was all right, and they shakily confirmed they were. HQ called in, asking if the shot was fired from their side. The team confirmed it was and said they would report when they returned. The recon team gathered, wondering how they were going to explain what happened. They agreed they would have to think of something. One soldier supporting the sergeant asked if he was all right, noting that he had cut his face pretty badly. They decided to get ready to head back and have the medics on standby. One of them tried to comfort the sergeant, telling him to just hang in there. But then, the sergeant bit the one comforting him, revealing that he had turned into a zombie, making the soldier scream in terror. The sergeant now turned, faced the rest of the team, who screamed in horror at the sudden betrayal. Suddenly, the video feed cut out, leaving the room in silence as the last screams of the Coast Guard members echoed. Seong-jin Kim announced that was all they had from the body cam footage, leaving the room in a tense silence. Minister Jung-yeol-yoon questioned the origin of the mysterious boat, only to learn it was unregistered and likely drifted from nearby waters. The minister couldn't hide his amazement at the creature's ability to function with half its body missing, questioning if it was even human. Seong-jin confirmed it was indeed human, with organs and genes identical to a human being's, but noted the hemoglobin levels were alarmingly low. Before he could finish, Yang Kyun-chae interrupted, demanding he stop using fancy words and speak plainly. Seong-jin began to simplify his explanation, but the tension in the room was palpable. He revealed that the creature didn't rely on lungs or a heart to survive, leaving the minister flustered. Seok-dae-han saw potential profit in this discovery, envisioning a future where hearts and lungs could be replaced. He cautioned against disclosing everything at once, suggesting they could maximize their gains. The minister acknowledged the potential danger, but also saw an opportunity for the nation. Seong-jin flinched as he admitted there were many obstacles to overcome, including the level of contagiousness. Seok-dae-han pressed for more information, asking about the estimated contact range. Seong-jin hesitated before explaining that cellular transformation likely occurred when germs and enzymes from the infected's mouth entered a person's bloodstream. Seok-dae scoffed, noting that transmission only occurred through skin bites, making it less contagious than some other diseases. He then questioned about the reverse scenario. Seong-jin looked confused as Seok-dae clarified his question, asking what would happen if a human bit or ate the mutant. Seong-jin admitted they hadn't researched that yet, causing Seok-dae to slam the table in frustration, scolding him for overlooking such a critical aspect. Minister Jung-yeol stepped in, trying to calm Seok-dae down and mentioned that they already had a sample. The minister suggested that experimenting on it shouldn't be too hard and asked Seong-jin if they could expect a report within the week. Seongjin was taken aback, wondering who he was supposed to feed the sample to, but reluctantly agreed. Seongjin tapped a device on his wrist and announced it was time to see the sample in real life, asking if the preparations were complete. He then pointed to the wall behind them. The wall started to open behind them. The wall opened with a rumble behind the minister. They turned to see what was behind the wall. They were met with a loud groan, causing the minister to exclaim in surprise. Behind the wall, the Coast Guard recon team that had turned into zombies were confined in a room. The zombies screeched loudly. The zombies rushed at them, slamming against the thick glass that separated the three influential figures from the zombies. The minister and his associate flinched as the zombies slammed against the glass, their faces twisted in horror. Seongjin Kim tapped the glass confidently, explaining that it was 5 inches of thick acrylic with less than 10% oxygen inside. He added that the oxygen level was around half of what Seoul had, trying to reassure the nervous men. The zombies pressed against the glass, unfazed by the lack of oxygen. As Seongjin Kim pointed out, they didn't feel pain. General Yongkyun Chae chimed in, noting that the zombies lacked intellect, otherwise they would make perfect soldiers. He wondered if the zombies could shoot guns, but Seongjin Kim didn't think so. General Yongkyun Chae still saw strategic value in the zombies and asked if their uses in military operations had been simulated. Seongjin Kim confirmed they had run simulations, detailing infection rates in small cities over a 3-day period. Professor Seok Dae-han guessed the decreased rate indicated when humans would start retaliating and suggested cutting off information exchange. Seongjin Kim then shared infection rates for megacities, which were much higher due to population density and the zombies' mobility. Minister Young Yeol-yoon asked General Yongkyun Chae if the numbers were strategically significant. General Yongkyun Chae replied that it was a huge loss to start a war with less than half the population, but they could be more useful than a nuclear weapon if used right. Minister Young Yeol-yoon questioned if the creatures had any weaknesses. Seongjin Kim explained that the creatures did not respond to any stimulation and were not influenced by injuries, but they would stop moving if their heads or brains were destroyed. Seongjin Kim added that they also found out that the creatures stopped moving at -67 degrees through a coldness reaction test. Minister Young Yeol-yoon noted that the creatures stopped moving at -67 degrees, but anything above that was fine, meaning they could control these things, leaving Seongjin Kim confused. Seongjin Kim stuttered that they had to overcome obstacles such as contagion. Minister Young Yeol-yoon raised his hand slowly and stated they had exactly 2 years. Minister Young Yeol-yoon put his hand against the zombie on the other side of the window and repeated that they had exactly 2 years. Seongjin Kim asked for clarification. Minister Young Yeol-yoon stated they would give him all the support he needed and instructed him to create a vaccine that would stop the mutation in that time. Sometime after the meeting, a truck escorted by a number of black cars was traveling in the night. Seongjin Kim scratched his hand in frustration and sighed, unsure if he was doing the right thing. They were going to set these things free around the globe once the vaccine was made, and Seongjin Kim imagined how valuable the vaccine would be then. Seongjin Kim told himself not to doubt himself as he had worked so hard for this opportunity. As the cars were traveling down the road, there were spike strips laid out. The tires of the cars blew out as they ran over the spike strips laid out on the road. The car swerved wildly, causing Seongjin Kim to panic and wonder what was happening. The cars came to a halt on the road with their tires blown out. Suddenly, another car appeared, and someone stepped out. The man began smoking in the pouring rain, his scar looking eerily familiar. Men stood with him blocking the way as Min-gu casually noted that it was raining. The man was revealed to be Min-gu, who wanted to get things over with quickly, as he was the number 3 of the Manbae clan, Min-gu Kong. Jinu sat in the military dorm room, pen in hand, lost in his thoughts as he wrote. Jinu wondered if his friends were staying out of trouble, reflecting on how he assumed the 4 of them would stay together forever. But it had already been 3 months since they had been apart, and he couldn't help but wonder how they were doing. He imagined Sheriff with his temper and Samshik with his odd taste in women, probably giving Yubin a headache. Still, he wanted to know what they were all up to, proudly declaring he had become a special marksman. Jinu boasted about shooting all 20 targets 250 meters away right in front of the battalion leader the day before. He promised to tell them more when he was outside, bidding them farewell for now. The scene shifted to a chaotic situation unfolding elsewhere. Seongjin Kim, a researcher from Kita, stammered in confusion as a government agent noticed the tire got caught in something. The agent was shocked to find car stopping nets, wondering if they were after his car. He tried to connect through his earpiece, but all he heard was static. Just as he tried to reach out through his earpiece, a sudden blow to his head left him reeling. With the agent down, the gangsters began to close in on the truck, sensing an opportunity. Mingu, the third in command of the Manbei clan, ordered his crew to seize the goods. He further instructed them to handle the rest, making sure nothing was left to chance. The gangsters, hyped up and ready for action, charged forward with a battle cry. The agents inside the car were caught off guard as the gangsters started breaking in. The agents were swiftly dragged out of the vehicle, their situation going from bad to worse. A chaotic fight erupted between the gangsters and the government agents, with orders flying left and right to take down the opposition. The agents inside the car realized these were not your average gangsters they were up against. One agent ordered a call for backup while the others prepared their weapons, ready to face the threat head-on. Suddenly, a knife found its mark on an agent's head, ending his life instantly. Mingu acted swiftly, taking advantage of the chaos to press their attack. Mingu suddenly appeared in front of the other agent, seemingly out of nowhere with a swift and devastating punch. Mingu struck the agent down. As Mingu looked up, the agent cried out in alarm, addressing someone as Sir. Suddenly, the other agents opened fire on Mingu, their bullets flying through the air. Mingu swiftly rolled to the side and grabbed the agent he had punched earlier. Using the agent as a shield, Mingu charged towards the other agents. The agents were shocked at the sight of Mingu's reckless charge, calling him a lunatic. Amid the chaotic battle, a sinister laughter echoed, adding to the madness. In a car nearby, the boss of the Manbei clan watched the scene unfold, commenting on Mingu's fearlessness. The boss marveled at Mingu's daring escape through the hail of bullets, almost as if he were flying. Seong-ho Choi, the second in command, questioned the boss about the importance of the job that required his personal attention. The boss revealed that Chairman Huang of Taiyang Group had tasked him with securing the contents of the truck at any cost. Seong-ho Choi was taken aback, realizing the gravity of the situation involving such a powerful figure. The boss emphasized the importance of the mission, leaving Seong-ho Choi in awe of the stakes involved. Seong-ho Choi couldn't believe that Chairman Huang, the leader of the Korean economy, was involved in this operation. Seong-ho Choi reflected on how Chairman Huang's sponsorship had shaped the Manbei clan into what it was today. Without that support, the clan might not even exist. This mission was a direct order from the chairman himself. Seong-ho Choi wondered what could be so important in that truck. The boss, however, seemed indifferent. All they needed to do was follow orders and get paid. Seong-ho Choi agreed. Seong-ho Choi pondered what the economic emperor could want by using the Emperor of the Night. Seong-ho Choi found the situation interesting. The battle concluded with the Manbei clan controlling the truck. The gangsters reported that they had secured the truck. Mingu ordered them to check the goods inside. The gangsters realized the truck was not a regular one, and they would have kept one alive if they knew about the passcode. They considered moving the entire truck, but Mingu warned about a GPS tracker that could compromise their location. Another gangster dragged Seongjin Kim out, who had been hiding in the shotgun seat of the truck. Seongjin Kim pleaded for his life, claiming he knew nothing. Mingu told him to stop whining and ordered the gangsters to search him. The gangsters were surprised to find out that the guy they were searching was a brainiac. They found his ID tag, and Mingu was pleased to know that he was a researcher from Kita. Mingu called out to Seongjin Kim, who responded nervously. Seongjin Kim was asked about the passcode for something, but he claimed he didn't know it as it was confidential information only for the agents. Mingu seemed skeptical about the confidentiality claim. Seongjin Kim insisted that it was indeed confidential. Without hesitation, Mingu slashed Seongjin Kim's face with a knife. Blood splattered from Seongjin Kim's face. Seongjin Kim screamed in agony, and Mingu prepared to ask his question again. Seongjin Kim begged for help, but it fell on deaf ears. Mingu closed in, showing the knife he was holding, and asked Seongjin Kim again about the passcode, warning him of the consequences. Seongjin Kim was slashed across the face again by Mingu. In pain, Seongjin Kim pleaded with Mingu, warning him about the danger inside and that it was not something he could control. Mingu told him to worry about his own life before worrying about them. Seongjin Kim glanced at Mingu, who made it clear that he wasn't going to give him an easy death. Mingu stared at Seongjin Kim menacingly. Under pressure, Seongjin Kim started disclosing the passcode, beginning with 6061864. One of the gangsters decided to verify the passcode. The truck door opened, and a gangster excitedly announced it to Seong-ho Choi, who then called out for Mingu. Seong-ho Choi impatiently questioned what was taking Mingu so long. Seong-ho Choi sarcastically asked if Mingu was waiting for the cops to arrive. One of the gangsters got annoyed, but Mingu held him back. The gangster addressed Mingu as brother, trying to calm the situation. Seongo Choi told Min-gu he needed to step up his game, sarcastically adding that Min-gu couldn't do anything without him. The gangsters mocked Seongo Choi, saying all he did was sit back during the dangerous parts and then take all the credit. Seongo Choi dramatically opened the truck wide, announcing his reveal. He remembered the boss's words to secure whatever was in the truck by any means necessary and wondered what could be so important. Seongo Choi speculated that it must be something significant for Chairman Huang to want it. He decided that finding out what was inside wouldn't hurt him. The second-in-command opened one of the boxes inside the truck, curiosity getting the better of him. A wave of cold air hit his face, making him wonder if the box was some kind of freezer. He turned on his phone's flashlight, peering inside to see what could possibly need such a chilly storage. A sudden shiver ran down his spine. Something about the box felt off. His eyes widened in shock as he realized it was a dead body, a zombie corpse no less. He stared at the corpse, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. He wondered if the other boxes contained the same grisly contents. He continued to look around, his mind racing with questions. Suddenly, the corpse's hand twitched, making him jump back in surprise. He couldn't fathom why anyone would treat a bunch of dead bodies so preciously. Then it hit him. Chairman Huang wouldn't want any regular corpses. These had to be special. He couldn't help but notice the state of the corpse's face. It was a mess, like something had taken a bite out of it. One of the gangsters outside called out, urging him to hurry up. He shouted back, telling them to be careful with the goods or they'd pay for it, and to stop rushing him. He closed the door behind him, still grumbling about the lack of respect from his crew. Seongo Choi was about to voice his frustration, but something caught his attention. As he turned, he found himself face to face with a zombie, leaving him utterly confused. Seongo Choi broke into a sweat, stunned to see the zombie seemingly alive and well. The zombie let out a low growl, its eyes locked onto Seongo Choi. The zombie took a step forward, closing the distance between them. Seongo Choi's mind raced, wondering if these corpses were special or if some new cryogenic technology was at play. Suddenly, the zombie lunged at him with surprising speed. Seongo Choi quickly sidestepped, barely dodging the attack. He countered with a powerful punch, determination in his eyes. His fist connected with the zombie's face, sending it reeling. Seongo Choi didn't let up, pummeling the zombie relentlessly. Blood splattered everywhere as he continued his assault. Despite his efforts, the zombie didn't go down, coughing and struggling on the ground. Seongo Choi, panting, declared his identity as the second-in-command of the Manbei clan. He noticed something odd, his eyes widening in surprise. While he was distracted, the zombie on the ground seized the opportunity and attacked. The zombie took advantage of the distraction and bit Seongo Choi's leg, causing him to scream in pain and surprise. Seongo Choi kicked the zombie away, desperately trying to free himself from its grip. But as he struggled, more zombies surrounded him, ready to attack. Seongo Choi realized he was in deep trouble and let out a desperate exclamation. Meanwhile, outside the truck, the gangsters were waiting. One of the gangsters asked Min-gu if they should go check on Seongo Choi, as he had been inside for a long time. Min-gu dismissed the idea, telling them not to bother and to just leave Seongo Choi be. Suddenly, a scream was heard from inside the truck. Min-gu turned his attention to the truck, sensing that something was wrong. The other gangsters rushed to the truck and slammed the door, demanding to know what was happening inside. They opened the truck and were horrified by what they saw. Seongo Choi was being eaten alive by the zombies. One of the gangsters jumped in, shocked and terrified by the gruesome scene. The terrified gangster snapped into action, kicking at the approaching zombie with a mix of panic and desperation. He quickly pulled out a knife, his hands shaking as he prepared to defend himself. With a series of frantic stabs, he plunged the knife into the zombie, his face contorted with fear and disgust. One of the gangsters outside yelled in frustration, urging his comrades to drag the injured man out of the room. The others stood frozen, their eyes wide with shock as they stared at the gruesome scene unfolding before them. Confusion flashed across the gangster's face as he turned to see another zombie lunging at him from behind. The zombie struck him down with a brutal force, leaving him groaning in pain. The gangster could barely comprehend what was happening, his mind racing as he tried to make sense of the creature before him. Suddenly, he fell silent, his body racked with silent coughs as the reality of his situation set in. The zombie wasted no time, sinking its teeth into the gangster's flesh with a sickening crunch. The remaining gangsters stood frozen, their faces pale with shock and horror. The other zombies, drawn by the commotion, screeched and rushed towards the paralyzed gangsters. One of the gangsters finally snapped out of his stupor, shouting for the others to grab their weapons. The gangsters scrambled to prepare themselves, their voices filled with a mix of fear and confusion as they tried to understand what they were up against. Min-gu thought about Seongo Choi, an annoying jerk, but not someone who would go down easily. He wondered who these mysterious attackers could be. Mingu vowed that whoever they were, if they messed with the clan, he would take them down. The zombies continued their relentless attack, feasting on the gang members as one of them cried out for help. The gangsters panicked, questioning if the creatures were cannibals and what they should do next. Mingu pushed his panicked comrades aside, stepping up to face the zombies. He approached the zombies, ready to take them on. One of the zombies turned its attention to Mingu, locking eyes with him. Mingu moved in close and slashed at the zombie with his knife. Mingu was taken aback, muttering about the zombie's resilience. Despite slashing its throat, the zombie continued to eat, leaving Mingu frustrated. Mingu clenched his knife, feeling his pride wounded. In an instant, he swiftly decapitated the zombie's head. The zombie's head rolled away on the rain-soaked street. Mingu began to observe the surroundings, his gaze sharp and alert. Suddenly, one of the gangsters warned Mingu about something behind him. Mingu swiftly turned around, ready to face whatever was coming his way. With quick reflexes, he dodged a rushing zombie and pushed it down to the ground. Mingu looked down at the zombie, a mix of confusion and frustration on his face. He kicked the zombie away, trying to put some distance between them. Mingu couldn't believe how resilient the zombie was, still moving despite being stabbed multiple times. Raising his hand to attack, Mingu questioned what the zombie truly was and why it wouldn't die. With a swift motion, Mingu crushed the zombie, hoping this would finally end it. Mingu expressed his dislike for the zombie's eerie voice, determined to figure out what it was. But to his surprise, the zombie stood up again, seemingly unfazed. Mingu laughed, finding a twisted amusement in the zombie's resilience. He realized that knives weren't effective and wondered how he had managed to kill the first zombie. Mingu pondered the situation, trying to recall how he had handled the first zombie. He thought back, trying to piece together the events. A realization struck Mingu as he considered the possibility that the head was the key. Without hesitation, Mingu jumped at the zombie, ready to test his theory. He aimed for the zombie's neck, hoping this would finally put an end to the relentless creature. He crunched the knife into the zombie's neck, hoping this would finally put an end to the relentless creature. The zombie lunged at Mingu, aiming straight for his face. Mingu barely dodged the attack, shifting his head just in time to avoid the zombie's bite. Mingu realized that if he had been a second late, he would have been a goner. He quickly supported himself by placing his palm on the ground. With a swift movement, he kicked the zombie's leg. The zombie lost its balance and started to fall. The zombie crashed onto the ground, and Mingu thought he could break its bones. The zombie quickly jumped back up. Mingu instantly kicked the zombie's head, crushing it. Mingu continued to hit the zombie's head repeatedly, wondering why it wasn't dead yet and shouting at the bastard. After repeated assaults to the head, the zombie finally stopped moving, its skull crushed. Mingu sighed, finally understanding something. He looked carefully at the zombie and commented that they seemed to love getting their skulls crushed. Mingu observed the zombie closely, his gaze sharp and calculating. He reached his hand towards the knife stuck on the zombie's neck, ready to make his move. Suddenly, the zombie woke up, its eyes snapping open with a jolt. Mingu twirled his leg, spinning gracefully to avoid the zombie's sudden attack. With a swift movement, he dodged the zombie's lunge, maintaining his balance. Mingu swiftly broke the zombie's leg, rendering it immobile. The zombie fell face first, flat on the ground, writhing in pain. Mingu grabbed a metal bar, preparing for the next phase of the confrontation. Mingu looked at the zombie, acknowledging its loyalty despite the circumstances. He noted that the zombie wasn't even scared, despite the fact that he had killed all of its friends. The zombie stood up, defiant and ready to face Mingu once more. Mingu and the zombie faced each other, tension filling the air as Mingu prepared to strike again. With a swift motion, Mingu smashed the zombie with the metal bar. The zombie fell, its bones broken, unable to stand. The zombie screamed in agony, then suddenly jumped, surprising Mingu. Before the zombie could recover, Mingu swung the metal bar with full force, aiming right at its head. The zombie hit the ground hard, and Mingu didn't waste a second, pinning it down with his foot on its face. Mingu muttered about loyalty having its place in time, clearly not in the mood for a zombie uprising. But the zombie wasn't done yet. It started moving again, roaring like it had just downed one too many energy drinks. Mingu watched, annoyed, as the zombie tried to force itself to move. Breaking its neck clearly wasn't enough to keep it down. He had to admit, the zombie had some serious willpower. But Mingu? He was over it. With a quick move, Mingu grabbed the metal rod and went for the final strike. Just as he was about to finish the job, the boss's car screeched to a halt nearby, and a voice boomed out, telling him to stop. Mingu paused, metal rod still poised, and glanced over as the boss stepped out of the car. The boss shouted that Mingu couldn't just kill all the zombies, they needed at least one alive to get paid. Mingu stayed silent, clearly not thrilled with the interruption. He glanced around at the other gang members who were looking worse for wear. Most of them were injured, some even dead, and the ones still standing were freaking out, questioning if the zombies were even human. Mingu clenched the metal bar, frustration written all over his face. The boss called out again, asking if Mingu was even listening. Mingu loomed over the boss, clearly not in the mood for orders, and told him to handle the payment issue himself while he took care of the crew. Mingu started walking away, ignoring the boss's outrage and his own name being called out. The boss grumbled about Mingu's attitude but admitted that was what he liked about him. The boss ordered his men to bring him the crippled zombie they were observing. The zombie screamed and screeched as the boss mentioned Chairman Huang was waiting for them. The gangsters tied down the zombie and put it in a box, questioning if it was human or beast, and mentioning they would have bashed its skull if not for the boss's orders. The gangsters closed the box, telling the zombie to consider itself lucky. They put the box at the back of the car. The boss asked what happened to Seongho, and a gangster called for help. The second in command was bloodied and put in the car, having lost too much blood and unconscious. The boss grumbled about him opening the truck and ordered to rush him to a hospital. A gangster informed the boss that the package was in the trunk. The boss ordered them to leave, telling the gangsters to clean up the site and return to base. The boss drove away. Mingu and the gangsters left, complaining about how the boss treated them and wondering about Iwi. The gangsters were furious, lamenting how the boss only cared about money despite the loss of their comrades. Mingu ordered them to stop complaining and start cleaning up, directing them to load their fallen comrades into the car and burn the rest. The gangsters reluctantly agreed, ready to follow Mingu's orders. Mingu placed a hand on one of the gangsters' shoulders, suggesting they grab a drink after finishing to bid their fallen comrades farewell. One of the gangsters called out to his brother, drawing everyone's attention. Another gangster stuttered in shock, pointing out that one of their comrades was still alive. As someone began stepping towards them, the gangsters watched in a mix of hope and disbelief. The gangster who spotted the survivor was taken aback, his shock evident. It turned out to be one of the gangsters they thought had died, Daeshik, standing before them. Mingu noticed something off about Daeshik's movements, his concern growing rapidly. Despite Mingu's warning, a gangster rushed to hug Daeshik, overjoyed to see him alive. The gangster turned happily, suggesting they get Daeshik to a hospital, unaware of the danger. Mingu shouted a warning to get away from Daeshik, his voice filled with urgency. Suddenly, Daeshik bit the gangster on the neck, the unexpected attack sending shockwaves through the group. The gangster was being eaten alive, his screams filling the air as chaos erupted. The gangsters stood in horror, realizing that Chilsung had just been bitten, their shock and fear palpable. Mingu rushed forward, yelling for everyone to move out of the way. He jumped forward, kicking the zombie in the face with his elbow. The zombie wobbled and was pushed off. The zombie regained its balance, looking even more menacing. Mingu stared at the zombie, realizing something was off about this guy. The zombie growled, and Mingu realized with horror that Chilsung had changed into one of them. Mingu wondered if it was a contagious disease, his mind racing with possibilities. One of the gangsters shouted in panic, pointing out that the dead guys were coming back to life. More of the dead began to rise as zombies, adding to the chaos. Mingu shivered at the sight, barely able to process what was happening. The gangsters turned their gaze to Mingu, their fear palpable as they asked what those things were. Mingu could only mutter, wondering what was going on. The zombies roared, their eerie cries filling the air. Then all the zombies started to attack, chaos erupting everywhere. The gangsters panicked, shouting for each other as the zombies attacked. Mingu instantly turned and ordered everyone to get in the car and leave. The zombies rushed the gangsters, creating even more chaos. The gangsters yelled to open the way as they were overwhelmed by the sheer number of zombies. One of the gangsters drove a car to Mingu, urging him to come their way. Mingu started to dash towards the car as the other gangsters urged him to hurry. Mingu entered the car while the other gangsters were being eaten alive, begging to be saved and taken with him. The gangsters pleaded desperately to be taken along as the zombies closed in. Mingu instructed the driver to go, leaving the others behind. The car started to drive away from the chaos. Zombies appeared in front of them, causing the gangsters to panic. The car drove over the zombies, clearing a path. Screams echoed as the car sped away from the horde. As the car sped away, a zombie crushed onto the front window, adding to the chaos. The zombie began to move, making the situation even more dire. The zombie slammed on the front window, causing the gangsters to yell in frustration. Mingu urged the driver to just go, trying to escape the horrifying situation. The car continued to speed away, leaving the horde behind. The car's speed increased as if trying to outrun the nightmare. Suddenly, the car skidded, making the ride even more chaotic. The car started to turn, moving on a weird path as if the driver had lost control. A zombie's hand shattered through the window, digging into the face of the driver, causing screams of pain. Mingu yelled at the driver to keep his eyes on the road, warning that they were heading into a building. Mingu realized it was too late to avoid the collision, bracing for impact. Mingu hastily put on his seatbelt, preparing for the worst. The car smashed into a wall, bringing the chaotic ride to a sudden halt. The car ground against the wall, the sound of metal on metal echoing through the air. Mingu cursed, getting back to his senses after the crash. The driver was unconscious, knocked out from the impact. The zombie that had caused all the chaos was now laying on the ground, seemingly defeated. Mingu groaned, wondering if he had dislocated his shoulder in the fight. He stumbled out of the car, trying to shake off the pain. Mingu started to assess the situation around him. A screech echoed from afar, catching Mingu's attention. Mingu let out a dark chuckle, realizing the fight was far from over. He declared that he wasn't done yet, ready to face whatever came next. Mingu suddenly remembered his knife and started searching for it. He recalled leaving it in the zombie's neck and spotted it. Mingu couldn't believe he had forgotten his knife, realizing this night was going to be a long one. The scene shifted to the Gangzhou purification plant, where things were about to get interesting. Suddenly, an alarm blared through the plant, shattering the early morning calm. Someone groaned, clearly not thrilled about the alarm disrupting their peace this early in the morning. A female researcher, Sujong Lim, stirred from her sleep, hoping this wasn't a water problem. Sujong Lim muttered about the potential trouble they'd be in if it was indeed a water issue. She stepped outside to investigate. Sujong Lim asked the guard about the siren, wondering if it was about the water purification. The guard pointed to the smoke near the wall, suggesting someone had crashed into it with a car. Sujong Lim observed the situation, remarking on how bad it looked. The guard noticed someone climbing over the wall, adding to the chaos. Guards near the wall shouted at the intruder, threatening to call the police. The guards commented on the situation, assuming the intruder was drunk. They continued to warn the intruder, criticizing their actions. Mingu, the intruder, jumped over the wall and landed face first on the ground. Sujong Lim expressed relief that the issue wasn't about the water and decided to go back to bed. The guards turned their attention to Mingu, surprised by his sudden appearance. Mingu swiftly knocked out the guard in front of him with a single punch, leaving the other guards in shock. He then reached for the guard's weapon, ready to take control of the situation. The guards couldn't believe their eyes as Mingu took down 2 security guards at once, realizing he was not drunk as they had thought. Mingu and the guard locked eyes, tension filling the air as the guard warned him not to move. Ignoring the warning, Mingu slowly started stepping forward, causing the guard to panic. The guard pointed his gun at Mingu, threatening to use his gas pistol to stop him. In a swift move, Mingu smacked the guard in the face with the baton, disarming him. Sujong Lim watched in surprise and shock as the scene unfolded before her. Mingu turned his menacing glare towards Sujong Lim, making her feel the weight of his intensity. Feeling the need to escape, Sujong Lim decided she needed to run. She turned and started running with all her might, her heart pounding in her chest. As soon as she reached the door, hope surged within her. She slammed it shut behind her, putting a barrier between her and Mingu. Sujong Lim tiptoed, stretching to close and lock the door, her hands trembling with urgency. She hurried, her breath ragged, as she tried to secure her escape. Just as she was about to make her escape, Mingu forced his way in and jammed the door open with a batter, causing Sujong to let out a startled scream. Mingu winced in pain, clutching his shoulder as he struggled to keep the door open. Sujong yelled at him, warning him not to do anything reckless and questioning his actions. Suddenly, Mingu stopped struggling and sat down, keeping the door open as he calmly addressed her, warning that if they continued like this, they would both die. Mingu expressed his wish that they would just die, as the consequences of their pursuers catching them would be worse than death. Mingu promised not to hurt her if she opened the door. He even offered to protect her, trying to convince her to trust him. Sujong was skeptical, wondering what he was talking about and questioning how she could trust someone who had trespassed and knocked out security guards. Mingu conceded that she didn't have to trust him, but insisted that she would end up opening the door one way or another. Outside the plant, zombies started climbing, and Mingu warned her that she would have to open the door eventually. Seeing the zombies, Sujong was terrified. The zombies began making their way towards them, and even the guards had turned into zombies, leaving Suzhong with no choice but to consider opening the door. Suzhong tightly secured the door with a wire, hoping it would hold against the zombies. Inside the plant kitchen, Suzhong couldn't help but wonder what those monsters were. Mingu replied that they were definitely not a surprise gift from someone. Suzhong snapped that it was no time for jokes, and Mingu admitted he really didn't know what was going on. Mingu treated his injury and mentioned he had only met those bastards that day, asking for a hand. He added that he knew one thing for sure: those monsters would never give up. So, forgetting about them disappearing on their own was out of the question. The night continued with stormy and rainy weather, adding to the tension. Mingu gazed at the knife stand in the kitchen, contemplating their next move. He took one knife in his hand, preparing for whatever might come next. Suzhong trembled with worry, her anxiety palpable. She looked around, searching for a way out or a solution. Mingu looked at her with a questioning gaze, wondering what she was up to. Suzhong mentioned she was heading to the night duty room to get the phone she left there to call the police. Mingu advised against it, asking if she was scared of them. He explained that anyone bitten by those monsters came back to life as one of them, and calling the police might only increase their numbers. Suzhong suggested they could just tell the police to be careful, still hoping for a way out. Mingu smirked, letting out a small laugh as if Suzhong's idea was the most ridiculous thing he'd ever heard. He pointed out that monsters with their guts hanging out were roaming around, and the police needed to be careful not to get bitten to death, questioning if they would even believe such a story. Suzhong Lim, frustrated, asked what his plan was, then calling him a buzzkill. At that moment they heard a shattering sound, like glass breaking. Suzhong wondered what that was and if the front door had broken. Mingu explained that doors with reinforced glass didn't make that sort of noise and suggested that it might be a place on the ground level with regular glass. Suzhong mentioned that the windows in the back were made of regular glass. Mingu concluded that must be the place and handed her a bat, saying it was better than knives for beginners. Suzhong looked confused, not understanding what he meant. Mingu reassured her that he wasn't asking her to fight, but to buy enough time to run if she ran into the monsters. He demonstrated how to use the bat, stepping out with his left leg and bending his knees. Then he made a powerful swing, showing her how it was done. Suzhong sarcastically replied, asking if she looked like him. Mingu handed over the bat, saying it was up to her. Suzhong told him to wait, but Mingu said he would wait there. Suzhong panicked and asked him to take her with him. Mingu fell silent, leaving her in suspense. Mingu warned her not to be clingy, and Suzhong Lim assured him she would never touch him. They started walking, but Mingu was limping along. Suzhong glanced around, noticing his struggle. She suggested taking the elevator, but Mingu refused. A zombie screech echoed, and Mingu warned her about the danger of open doors. He told her to stay quiet unless absolutely necessary. She nodded in agreement, understanding the gravity of the situation. They climbed the stairs, and Mingu commented on the eerie quietness. He noticed the motion sensor light was on, hinting at something amiss. Mingu sensed something was there, his instincts on high alert. He tiptoed up the stairs quietly, trying not to make a sound. Suddenly, he drew his knife, preparing for whatever lay ahead. Out of nowhere, a zombie appeared, catching them off guard. Mingu stepped back, narrowly missing the zombie by inches. Losing his balance, he started moving down the stairs backward. In a swift move, Mingu shifted his body, trying to regain control. Mingu dodged the incoming zombie, causing it to slam face first into the wall. Seizing the opportunity, Mingu launched an attack on the disoriented zombie. With a swift motion, he plunged his knife into the zombie's neck. He then yanked out the knife violently, ensuring the zombie was down for good. Suzhong Lim watched in surprise as the scene unfolded before her. Mingu, breathless and staring at the lifeless zombie, wondered if the creature was truly dead. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a cigarette pack, and told Suzhong Lim to head back to the canteen. As he lit up his cigarette, he warned her that her presence would only complicate things further. Suddenly, the air filled with the screeches of zombies, echoing ominously. Mingu clenched his knife tightly, preparing for what was to come. The zombies came running down the stairs, drawn by the commotion. Mingu couldn't help but mutter about needing at least some time to enjoy his cigarette before dealing with more zombies. Suzhong Lim stood there, visibly shaken and surprised by the unfolding chaos. Mingu cursed his luck, realizing he was in no shape to fight in such a cramped space. He needed a larger area to maneuver, somewhere he could actually swing without hitting a wall. A zombie lunged at Mingu, but he swiftly sidestepped, avoiding the attack with ease. Seizing the moment, he slashed at the zombie, aiming to take it down. The cut was shallow, barely phasing the zombie, leaving Mingu frustrated. As if things weren't bad enough, another zombie appeared out of nowhere. Mingu quickly reacted, knowing he had to take this one down fast. He aimed for the legs, slashing hard and sending the zombie off balance. The zombie wobbled, struggling to stay upright as Mingu pressed his advantage. Grabbing the zombie's collar, Min-gu prepared to finish it off. With a powerful punch, he slammed the zombie into the wall, knocking it out cold. But before he could catch his breath, the second zombie was already closing in, forcing Min-gu to ready his knife once more. Min-gu kicked the zombie right in the face, his boot connecting with a satisfying thud. The pinned zombie started struggling, thrashing about in a desperate attempt to break free. Min-gu slammed the zombie hard with his elbow, putting all his weight into the blow. He released the knife from his mouth, grabbing it firmly with his hand, ready for the next move. Then Min-gu twirled and spun, using the momentum to position himself for a decisive strike. With a swift motion, he slashed the head of the zombie clean off, sending it rolling to the ground. At that moment, Min-gu noticed Sujong Lim, a researcher from the Gangso purification plant, letting out a scream as the second zombie rushed towards her. The second zombie was closing in on Sujong Lim, its arms outstretched and hungry for a meal. Min-gu yelled to her, urging her to go for the zombie's legs. The zombie dashed forward with a screeching sound, its eyes locked onto its next victim. At that moment, Sujong remembered Min-gu's demonstration: step with the left leg, bend the knee, and swing like he showed her. She clenched the bat tightly, her knuckles turning white with fear and determination. She stepped forward with one leg, just as Min-gu had instructed. With a swift motion, she attacked the zombie's leg, aiming for its knees. The zombie, losing its balance, fell to the ground with a thud, its legs giving out from under it. Sujong froze in shock, her eyes widening at the unexpected turn of events. Before she could react, the falling zombie crashed into her, sending her tumbling to the ground. The zombie, now on top of her, fixed its gaze on Sujong, its eyes filled with a terrifying hunger. Overwhelmed by fear and exhaustion, Sujong fainted, her body going limp beneath the zombie. The zombie roared, rushing towards her, ready to strike. Just as it was about to attack, the zombie suddenly stopped, its body convulsing. The zombie started bleeding profusely, its movements halting abruptly. It was Min-gu who had stabbed the zombie's head, saving Sujong at the last moment. Min-gu frowned, his expression a mix of concern and determination. He glanced at the fainted Sujong, ensuring she was safe. With a sigh of relief, Min-gu muttered about keeping his promise. Suddenly, another roar echoed through the building, putting Min-gu on high alert. Min-gu, carrying Sujong, quickly returned to the kitchen, his mind racing with thoughts of the ongoing danger. He gently lowered her, placing her down safely, his expression grim as he prepared for whatever came next. He then sat down, leaning against the wall, clearly needing a moment to catch his breath. Suddenly, the door started to slam violently, accompanied by a terrifying growling sound. Min-gu muttered to himself, asking for a break, clearly frustrated with the situation. Standing up, Min-gu decided that maybe this was more fun for him after all. He figured the monsters wouldn't reach her inside the refrigerator. Min-gu cut the electric socket of the refrigerator, preparing to use it as a hiding spot. He joked that she might get a little cold, knowing she wouldn't hear him. He placed her inside the refrigerator, saying it was the best he could do. The door slamming continued, the sound growing louder as he told her to hang in there until help arrived the next day. Suddenly, the zombies broke in, their growls filling the room. Min-gu turned and glanced at the zombies, assessing the situation. The driver also turned, and Min-gu couldn't believe his eyes, asking if it was really Sheriff. Min-gu cursed under his breath, realizing the gravity of the situation. He told the zombies to wait right there, promising to let them rest soon. Min-gu then pushed the service cart at the zombies, ready to take them on. The zombies, unfazed by the cart, headed straight for Min-gu. Min-gu pushed against them, but one zombie dodged his attack. Before he knew it, the zombie was right on him. Without hesitation, Min-gu slashed the zombie's neck. Blood splattered everywhere as the zombie staggered. The zombie finally collapsed, lifeless on the ground. The other two zombies growled menacingly, their eyes locked on Min-gu. Min-gu stood unfazed, ready for whatever came next. With a quick move, he cut off one of the zombie's hands. The zombie roared in agony, but Min-gu was far from done. He spun the knife expertly, handling it like a pro. Min-gu struck the zombie's neck, declaring it had enough and could die. Now suddenly, another zombie attacked him from behind. Min-gu swiftly turned and stabbed the zombie, taking it down. Min-gu stood there, surrounded by the defeated bodies of the zombies, catching his breath. The kitchen was a mess with zombie blood flowing everywhere. Min-gu pulled out a cigarette, taking a moment to exhale and relax. He glanced down at the bodies of the zombies scattered around him. He placed the cigarette on the body of a defeated zombie, almost as a tribute. Min-gu walked away, limping slightly from the battle. As he walked out, he looked around, taking in the aftermath. He remembered the professor's words, warning him about the dangers inside. Min-gu wondered if Seong-ho was also affected by whatever was inside. He looked at his broken phone, frustrated by the lack of information. In the distance, he spotted some people. One of them was wearing a police uniform, which caught his attention. Min-gu threw his knife aside, preparing to investigate. He signaled to the group, trying to get their attention. Suddenly, he realized something was off. He noticed that the people were actually zombies. The zombies started running towards him, ready to attack. Mingu sighed, realizing the sheer number of zombies coming at him. He wondered who had turned them into monsters as he started fighting them off. Meanwhile, at a construction site, Sheriff asked Yubin if he wanted some stew for lunch. Yubin groaned, saying they had stew the day before too. But Sheriff just laughed, saying he loved stew. Just then, Samshik called out to them, waving a letter. Samshik excitedly announced that Jinu had sent them a letter. Sheriff was surprised and rushed to see the letter. He eagerly told Samshik to open it already. Sheriff laughed, saying he knew Jinu would come to his senses. He read out loud that Jinu now liked Jenny better than Tara since joining the military. Yubin muttered that Jinu was a traitor. Samshik wondered what a special marksman was. Yubin explained it meant Jinu was good at shooting guns. Samshik thought it made sense since Jinu was the best in the games they used to play. Sheriff laughed, saying video games and real life were different. Sheriff groaned, noticing the newbie goofing off again. The newbie was amazed at something on his phone. Sheriff approached the newbie, asking what he was watching. The newbie jolted, saying Sheriff scared him. Sheriff asked why he was so jumpy. Sheriff accused the newbie of watching something inappropriate, making the newbie panic and demand his phone back. Samshik got excited about the idea of watching something inappropriate while Yubin tried to be the voice of reason, reminding them they were at work. Sheriff and Samshik insisted on watching the video while Yubin weakly protested. Eventually, Sheriff turned it on. The video turned out to be a chaotic scene of zombies eating people and causing mayhem, much to everyone's surprise. The video revealed a city engulfed in flames, leaving Sheriff utterly bewildered. The area in the video was infested with zombies, causing civilians to scream in terror and desperation. The horrifying sight of zombies devouring people unfolded before their eyes. The zombies roared, their eerie sounds echoing through the video. The group of friends watched the video in shock as screams for help filled the air. Samshik pointed out the obvious: they were indeed eating people. Sheriff wondered if this was some kind of movie trailer, hoping it wasn't real. The newbie snatched his phone back, explaining it was the viral Noksupyong Station zombie video. They sarcastically checked if anyone had seen the video before, but no one had. The newbie groaned in frustration, hating the countryside for its lack of service. Sheriff snapped at the newbie for his blue-collar comment, but Yubin intervened to stop the argument. The newbie walked away, checking his phone while Sheriff demanded him to stop. The phone showed no service, much to the newbie's dismay. Sheriff muttered about getting revenge one day while Yubin tried to calm him down. Samshik noticed the oldies hadn't returned from lunch yet, which seemed odd. Yubin agreed and decided to give them a call, suspecting they might have gone for drinks again. Yubin searched his pocket for his phone, ready to call their missing friends. But his phone was nowhere to be found, leaving Yubin puzzled. Sheriff decided to make the call instead, but Samshik pointed out that his phone was also missing. Samshik revealed that their phones had been confiscated and placed in the truck due to their excessive goofing off. Sheriff, blushing, suggested they focus on work and save the clubbing for later. Just as they agreed to get back to work, Yubin tried to quiet everyone down, sensing something unusual. Suddenly, multiple helicopters flew overhead, catching their attention. Yubin marveled at the number of choppers, while Sheriff wondered if there was military training nearby. Meanwhile, Samshik was just really hungry. The scene shifted to the city, where the streets were bloodied, contrasting sharply with Sheriff's words about takeout. It turned out the others Sheriff mentioned had been turned into zombies. Sheriff joked that if they were that nice, they would be married already, and everyone laughed. But then Sheriff started worrying about them, fearing they might have gotten into another car accident. Back at the construction site, the group was unaware of the chaos unfolding in the city. Samshik gazed into the distance, his stomach growling loud enough to echo his despair. With a telescope in hand, Samshik's hunger only intensified as he scanned the horizon, hoping for a miracle. His stomach growled even louder, a symphony of starvation that seemed to mock him. Sheriff wondered where Samshik had found the telescope, to which Yubin casually mentioned it was from a crane machine a couple of days ago. Sheriff was surprised to learn that Samshik had spent over 10,000 won on it, a fact that Yubin found hilarious. Sheriff couldn't believe that something that would cost less than 3,000 won in a supermarket was so overpriced. Samshik spotted a wrench and some dog poo through the telescope, much to Yubin's disgust. Samshik could see the station clearly, but nothing beyond it, which was frustrating. Sheriff pointed out that the telescope wasn't an X-ray goggle, so it was obviously limited. Samshik still thought it was pretty useful, but Sheriff quickly shut that down. Sheriff declared it super useless, and Yubin suggested throwing it away. The newbie took a cold bottle of water, trying to cool down. The newbie complained about the heat, clearly struggling with the weather. Sheriff asked if the newbie's phone was still not working, to which the newbie replied it wasn't. The newbie couldn't understand why they would build a senior citizen center in the middle of nowhere. Yubin explained that they scrapped the original new town plan, leaving the newbie confused. Sheriff cut the chit-chat and suggested they go eat, warning they would die of starvation at this rate. Samshik enthusiastically suggested cold noodles, but the newbie pointed out they didn't have a car to get there. Yubin suggested they walk to get cold noodles, leaving the newbie shocked at the idea. The newbie couldn't believe they were expected to walk for 50 minutes just for noodles. Yubin explained that taking the paved road and climbing the fence would cut their time to just 10 minutes. The newbie dreaded the idea of such an adventure and let out a groan of frustration. The newbie decided to stay behind, asking them to bring something back for him. Sheriff muttered about his dislike for the guy. Sheriff looked at Samshik, confused by his actions. Samshik put on gloves, explaining they would make climbing the fence easier, and jokingly asked if he was the only one who thought they looked cool. Yubin snapped at Samshik to stop goofing off and focus on getting to the cold noodles. They reached the fence, ready to climb over. One by one, they started climbing over the fence. They jumped over the fence, each with varying degrees of success. Yubin struggled to climb while Sheriff fell face first, and Samshik landed perfectly, laughing at their misfortunes. As they watched multiple choppers passing by, Samshik joked about how easily they could visit Genu if they had one of those. Yubin couldn't help but marvel at the choppers, joking that only the rich could afford such luxury. Sheriff, ever the dreamer, declared that for his next birthday he wanted a used car, while Yubin playfully added that he'd settle for Samshik paying off his loans. Suddenly, music filled the air, and Samshik recognized it as Mr. Old Songs. Sheriff groaned about the durability of the radio, which seemed to play endlessly without breaking. From afar, they spotted Mr. Old Song walking around, and Sheriff couldn't hide his annoyance, calling him a nuisance. Sheriff suggested they leave quickly before the music gave him an earworm. Yubin pointed out that they were really close to their destination if they just crossed the station. Samshik noticed something odd. His curiosity piqued. Someone approached them, and Sheriff and Samshik exchanged confused glances, wondering who this new person was. The person was injured and moving strangely, clearly not quite right. Samshik joked about the energy of the people around there. Yubin felt something was off, and Sheriff couldn't help but agree. Yubin wondered what an office worker was doing in a closed station where trains didn't even stop. He noticed the wounds on the man seemed strange, and there was blood all over his body. Samshik called out to the man, asking if he was all right. Samshik reached out his hand, genuinely concerned about the man's well-being. Suddenly, the man moved swiftly and attacked Samshik. Samshik swiftly shoved the zombie away, his voice filled with shock and disbelief as he questioned the man's sudden aggression. In the struggle, Samshik's fingers ended up dangerously close to the zombie's teeth. The zombie's jaws snapped shut, biting down on Samshik's fingers with a sickening crunch. Sheriff and Yubin were left in shock, their voices filled with disbelief and concern as they reacted to the sudden turn of events. Samshik screamed in terror, desperately trying to push away the zombie biting his fingers. Samshik yelled in disbelief, questioning why the zombie would bite someone's fingers. The zombie bit harder, its grip tightening as Samshik struggled. Yubin noticed the zombie's crazy eyes, and Samshik called out for Sheriff in panic. Sheriff rushed to help his friend, questioning if the old guy started the fight. Sheriff jumped up, targeting the zombie for an attack. Sheriff kicked the zombie in the face, making it let go of Samshik's fingers. The zombie was crushed down on the ground. Sheriff asked if Samshik was all right, and Yubin insisted on seeing the bite. Samshik grinned, seemingly unfazed by the ordeal. He declared he was perfectly fine, leaving Yubin and Sheriff in stunned silence. Samshik claimed he totally got them, prompting Sheriff to jokingly ask if he should kill him. Yubin sighed in relief, glad that Samshik had safety gloves on. Samshik boasted about his preparedness, while Sheriff jokingly threatened to throw him in the river. Suddenly, the zombie screeched, shifting their attention to it. Sheriff observed that the zombie was already limp. Sheriff asked Samshik for his gloves, leaving Samshik confused and wondering if Sheriff was planning to fight the zombie. Sheriff put on the safety gloves and assured everyone he wasn't going to fight, despite Yubin thinking the zombie seemed crazy. Samshik and Sheriff exchanged sarcastic remarks, clearly not convinced by each other's words. Sheriff insisted he would use his words, not fists, but his actions suggested otherwise as he started warming up. The zombie began to stand, and Sheriff reiterated he really wasn't going to fight. The zombie suddenly dashed at them, and Sheriff quickly added that he wouldn't fight unless attacked first. Yubin alerted that the zombie was coming at them again, and Sheriff let out a frustrated tisk. Sheriff called out to the zombie, trying to get its attention. Sheriff stomped his leg, twisted, and raised his leg, preparing for action. With all his power, Sheriff kicked the zombie, sending it flying. The zombie's ribs cracked and broke from the powerful kick. Sheriff was shocked, realizing he had screwed up and kicked the zombie too hard. Flustered, Sheriff tried to address the zombie again, but it was no use. The zombie roared and attacked, catching Sheriff off guard. Sheriff couldn't believe it, swearing he had cracked the zombie's ribs. The zombie dashed at Sheriff, who moved back but found himself trapped against the guardrails. Sheriff looked back, realizing he was cornered with no escape. Sheriff, with a determined look, realized he wasn't going down without a fight. He sidestepped, dodging the zombie's attack, and the zombie slammed against the rail, which started to break down, taking the zombie with it. Sheriff reached out his hand, shocked at the turn of events. He tried to grab the zombie, but it was too late. Sheriff missed, and the zombie fell down, crashing into the river below. Yubin called out, concerned, asking if Sheriff was all right. They looked down at the river, where the zombie had fallen. Samshik asked if Sheriff had killed the mister, but Sheriff defended himself, saying the zombie had run into the river by himself. Yubin reassured them that the zombie would be fine, as it wasn't that high up and he had fallen into water. Yubin suggested they go down and check on the zombie, as he might have survived the fall, but it wasn't safe to leave him there. Suddenly, Samshik noticed that the zombie was moving again. They saw the zombie raising, and Samshik wondered what he was doing. The zombie turned and started to run in another direction, much to their surprise. Samshik wondered where the zombie was going, as there was nothing that way. Sheriff, relieved, said that the zombie scared him but suggested they go eat already. Yubin was in deep thought, wondering how the zombie was so fine after getting kicked like that and even biting Samshik. Yubin thought that things did not add up. He was confused as to how the railing was completely destroyed when the zombie simply ran into it. Sheriff called out to Yubin. Sheriff said that they were going with or without him, and Samshik was excited about eating cold noodles and even Yubin's share. They moved down the subway and Yubin was just happy that they were all safe, but he did not want cold noodles. Sheriff suggested maybe having stew. Yubin groaned at the thought of having stew again, as Sheriff said that he loved stew. Samshik still wanted cold noodles and Sheriff said that they should eat separately then. Samshik said no, as he wanted to eat Yubin's food, and everyone laughed. Samshik was hungry and asked Sheriff if they were there yet. Sheriff said that they were almost there and pointed to the exit. They heard a boom sound and wondered what it was. Samshik took the lead and thought that maybe there was a festival. Sheriff questioned the idea of a festival happening in broad daylight, but Yubin suggested they head up first to check it out. As Samshik stepped out, eerie screeches and growls filled the air, causing him to freeze in his tracks. Sheriff and Yubin noticed and couldn't help but tease him about it. Sheriff started to ask who it could be this time, but his words trailed off as they all froze in shock. The sight before them was unimaginable. The city was in flames, with bodies scattered everywhere. Civilians screamed in terror, begging for help amidst the chaos. The trio stood stunned, shaking at the horrific scene unfolding before them. The city was in complete chaos. People were running for their lives, screaming to be left alone. Zombies were feasting on people, the gruesome sight too much to bear. The creatures were devouring flesh, their grotesque forms a nightmare come to life. The city was overrun with zombies, the sheer number of them overwhelming. The trio was terrified, barely able to comprehend the horror before them. Sheriff tried to speak, but words failed him. Samshik wondered if they were shooting a film, but Sheriff quickly dismissed the absurd notion. Suddenly, someone clamped a hand over Samshik's mouth, interrupting his thoughts. Yubin hushed Samshik, urging them to get out of there quietly. Sheriff nodded in agreement, signaling their silent retreat. They began to move away slowly, trying not to draw attention. With careful steps, they turned and started to make their escape. They moved away, hoping to leave the nightmare behind. But fate had other plans. One of the zombies spotted them. The zombie let out a screech, alerting the others to their presence. Sheriff glanced back, his face dropping as he realized the gravity of their situation. Sheriff yelled for everyone to run as multiple zombies rushed towards them. The zombie horde rushed at them, a terrifying wave of the undead. Samshik screamed in terror, wondering if this was all part of some twisted movie. Yubin quickly shot back that it was no movie. Those things were actually eating people. Samshik, still in disbelief, asked what those things were. Yubin, with a grim look, replied that they were zombies. Samshik was stunned, asking if Yubin meant like from The Walking Dead. Yubin confirmed, saying that was exactly it. Yubin then turned, his face pale as he realized the zombies were closing in. Yubin muttered that it was the only explanation as the zombies drew nearer. The group rushed to the exit, their hearts pounding with fear and adrenaline. The zombies were pursuing them, their eerie groans echoing through the air. Samshik screamed in terror that they were going to be caught, prompting Yubin to tell him to shut up and Sheriff to add that he was scaring them even more. They ran up the subway exit, hoping to find safety above ground. The zombies followed them up the subway exit, their relentless pursuit continuing. The group ran straight away, their legs moving as fast as they could. Samshik suddenly turned right. shouting for the others to follow him. Yubin questioned where he was going. Samshik dashed to the fence, seeing it as a potential escape route. Samshik put his leg against the fence, preparing to climb. He started to climb, his movements quick and desperate. The others stopped and observed him. Samshik urged them to grab his hand. At that moment, the zombies were rushing at them. Samshik yelled for them to hurry. Samshik grabbed Yubin's hand, pulling him up. Yubin used Sheriff as a push, and Samshik pulled Yubin up, telling him to hurry up. But the zombies were super close. Sheriff let out a terrified scream. Sheriff told Yubin to hold on. Yubin questioned what he was doing. Sheriff, with all his might, prepared to push them to safety. Sheriff pushed both of them up, throwing them over the fence. The two fell on the other side of the fence, landing with a thud. They got up quickly. Worried for their friend, Yubin called out for Sheriff. Just as they called out, Sheriff made a swift and unexpected leap. With a graceful jump, Sheriff cleared the fence effortlessly. Sheriff landed safely on the other side, looking as cool as ever. Yubin facepalmed, realizing Sheriff wasn't human. Samshik joked that he must be a gorilla. Samshik admitted they were worried about Sheriff. Suddenly, the zombies began to swarm against the fence. The group was terrified by the rumbling of the zombies. The zombies pushed relentlessly against the fence. Sheriff wondered if the zombies could climb over the fences. Yubin pointed out that zombies don't climb. Sheriff was starting to believe in the zombie theory. Samshik was just happy they didn't have to run anymore. And Sheriff agreed. Samshik and Sheriff were relieved they could finally take a break. Yubin warned them not to let their guards down just yet. Yubin cautioned that if those fences fell, they would be in serious trouble. The zombies were relentless, pushing harder against the fence. Sheriff tried to reassure everyone, saying the fences would hold. Samshik hesitantly asked if they thought Mr. Huang and the others had been eaten by the zombies too. Sheriff braced himself for the answer. Samshik voiced the grim possibility that Mr. Huang and the others might have been eaten by the zombies. Yubin somberly agreed, saying the chances were pretty high. Sheriff suggested they head back to the construction site first and think about their next steps once they were there. Yubin let out a sigh, muttering about the absolute mess they were in. On the other side of the fence, zombies were also pressing against it, adding to their predicament. The zombies were pushing hard against the fence, threatening to break through. Sheriff noticed the zombies on the other side and wondered aloud what they should do. Samshik realized they were surrounded by zombies, making their situation even more dire. Sheriff suggested they go inside the subway station, but Yubin pointed out that the station was closed off and the doors were probably locked. Yubin continued, saying that if the doors were really locked, they wouldn't have a place to run to. Yubin finished his thought, emphasizing that they would be trapped with no escape. Even if the doors weren't locked, Yubin doubted they could secure all the doors in such a huge building by themselves. Samshik asked Sheriff if he could just beat all the zombies up, but Sheriff said he couldn't. Sheriff explained that it was impossible to beat up things that didn't feel any pain. Yubin then asked if Sheriff could kill the zombies, which left Sheriff taken aback. Sheriff couldn't believe what he was hearing and asked if Yubin was seriously telling him to kill other people. Yubin clarified that they wouldn't be murdering anyone, as those things were no longer human. Sheriff agreed, noting that they certainly didn't look human anymore. Suddenly, Samshik threw a rock at a zombie's head, landing a hard hit. Samshik declared he would take them out with rocks. Sheriff and Yubin exchanged glances, both thinking how very reliable that plan was. The zombie's skin peeled and it screeched in response to the rock. Sheriff observed the scene carefully. After a moment of thought, Sheriff turned to Yubin. Sheriff stated that he thought he could kill those things but would need a weapon. Yubin glanced around, questioning the need for a weapon. Sheriff explained that he couldn't kill them with his bare hands. He reiterated that those things were monsters. Yubin expressed doubt about finding anything useful there. Sheriff mentioned he would have to use a rock if all else failed. Samshik thought about a weapon and felt like he had seen something Sheriff could use. Suddenly, Samshik's eyes widened as he realized something. Samshik exclaimed that he had an idea. Sheriff asked what he had. Samshik winked and told them to follow him. Sheriff and Yubin were confused, wondering what was going on and why Samshik had winked. Amid the confusion, something caught Samshik's attention. He reached for a wrench lying nearby. Samshik grinned, feeling rather pleased with himself for finding it. He handed the wrench to Sheriff, who took it but was clearly puzzled about how Samshik knew it was there. Samshik explained that he had seen it earlier through his telescope, casually mentioning that someone had tossed it next to some dog poo. Yubin and Sheriff were taken aback, wondering if Samshik was serious. Sheriff realized they now had a weapon, but the challenge was how to use it against the zombies. Yubin pointed out that there were fewer zombies in one direction, but they were all focused on them. Samshik noted that the zombies would likely attack before they could even get close. The zombies violently shook the fence, making the situation even more dire. Yubin noticed that the fence was about to fall, adding to the urgency. The number of zombies was increasing rapidly. The tension among the group rose as the situation worsened. Sheriff decided he had to risk it and open a path by going to the other side first. Just as Sheriff was about to act, Samshik raised his hand, claiming he had an idea. Sheriff and Yubin looked at Samshik, curious about what he had in mind. Samshik grinned and declared he would be the bait. Samshik reiterated that he would be the bait, reminding everyone of his impressive speed. He explained his plan to climb over the fence and lure the zombies, with Sheriff coming to his aid afterward. Sheriff remarked that Samshik was always helping others at his own expense, a sentiment Yubin echoed, noting that Samshik would always be like that. Samshik insisted that this was the best plan, but Sheriff pointed out that Samshik was the fastest among them. Sheriff grabbed Samshik and told him to shut his trap. Sheriff questioned the plan, asking if Samshik expected them to run while he was out there dying. Samshik told Sheriff to calm down, assuring him that no one was going to die. Sheriff told Samshik to listen up and never sacrifice himself, emphasizing the importance of looking out for himself first. Sheriff asked if Samshik got that and added that they were going to go together. Samshik was amazed by Sheriff's words. Samshik responded with an enthusiastic "okay." Samshik expressed his gratitude, but Sheriff told him to beat it. Yubin pointed out that it was too dangerous to climb over the fence and wondered if there was a way to fight the zombies without doing so. Yubin observed the wrench near the fence. Yubin thought there might be a way after all. Yubin called out to the guys, getting Sheriff's attention. Yubin suggested they loosen the bolts on the fence halfway. Yubin pointed out the top bolt, insisting it needed to be the one to go first. They got to work, loosening the bolt as Yubin explained how it would make the zombies tumble head first. Samshik showed Sheriff the opposite side of the fence, urging him to hurry as it was about to collapse. Sheriff, struggling with the bolts, asked for help with his fingers. Samshik kept pushing Sheriff to hurry, who responded that he was working on it as fast as he could. A loud crack echoed, signaling the fence was about to give way. Sheriff finally finished, declaring he was done. Yubin urged everyone to hurry. Sheriff nodded in agreement as Yubin laid out the plan. He would create a gap in the fence while the others handled any zombies that tried to get through. With a determined tone, Yubin signaled it was time to go. Samshik nodded, ready to follow the plan. Sheriff clenched his wrench, preparing for action. Yubin leaped into action, grabbing the top of the fence. Using his body weight, Yubin started to pull the fence down. The fence began to bend under the pressure. Samshik shouted now, signaling the final push. A small gap appeared in the fence, and a zombie immediately tried to squeeze through. The zombie squeezed itself through the gap, reaching out with a desperate hunger. Sheriff tried to reassure himself, but Samshik's urgent call snapped him back to reality. With a swift strike, Sheriff smashed the zombie's head, cracking its skull as he muttered that it was just a monster. The zombie collapsed to the ground, seemingly defeated. Sheriff stood there, panting and out of breath from the sudden exertion. But his surprise was palpable as the zombie began to twitch and screech, refusing to stay down. Sheriff couldn't believe his eyes as the zombie quivered on the ground, still screeching, and he wondered why it wouldn't just die already. More zombies arrived, slamming against the fence and squeezing through the gap. Yubin shouted at Sheriff to focus and do something. Frustration took over as Sheriff let out a scream, his patience wearing thin. He started attacking the fallen zombie repeatedly, determined to put an end to its misery. Finally, the zombie stopped moving, lying still on the ground. Samshik noted that was a close call and wondered if zombies only die when their skulls are caved in. Sheriff rushed to Yubin, telling him he could let go now. With wrench in hand, Sheriff stretched out his arm, ready for more action. He started attacking the zombies with renewed vigor, determined to protect everyone. Just as Sheriff was getting into the groove, another zombie screeched and lunged at him. Sheriff swiftly shifted to the right, dodging the zombie's attack with a quick sidestep. Without missing a beat, Sheriff swung his weapon with all his might. The wrench connected with the zombie's face, sending it reeling. The zombie hit the ground hard, sprawling out in the dirt. But it wasn't quite done yet, still twitching and moving slightly. Sheriff let out a frustrated exclamation, realizing the zombie was still a threat. With a fierce battle cry, Sheriff continued his assault with the wrench. Sheriff attacked the zombie mindlessly, fueled by adrenaline and frustration. Suddenly, the others intervened, grabbing Sheriff and urging him to stop. Sheriff began to calm down, his breathing heavy and ragged from the exertion. Finally, he stopped, lowering his weapon and taking a moment to catch his breath. At that moment, another section of the fence collapsed, adding to the chaos. The group exchanged worried glances, knowing they were in a tight spot. The zombies rushed in through the gap, their numbers overwhelming. Multiple zombies started running towards them. their movements erratic and relentless. Yubin saw an opportunity and bolted through the gap, shouting for the others to follow. Samshik quickly followed, leaving Sheriff behind as Yubin urged him to hurry. Sheriff found himself alone, left behind in the chaos. As Sheriff tried to squeeze through a gap, he got stuck, letting out a sudden yelp of surprise. Yubin noticed his struggle and called out concerned. Sheriff realized his clothes were snagged on the fence, holding him back. In a quick move, Sheriff ripped his vest to free himself. He tried to reassure himself, telling himself to calm down, but the zombies were dangerously close, making it hard for him to stay calm. Sheriff's panic grew as he realized he couldn't calm down with the zombies so close. With a burst of strength, Sheriff pushed through the gap with all his might, screaming in effort. Sheriff barely made it through the gap, escaping the zombies by just an inch. Relieved, Sheriff let out a sigh, glad to be out of the tight spot. But the zombies weren't giving up, forcing their way through, and one of them fell down. The fallen zombie grabbed Sheriff's leg, trying to pull him back. Sheriff was unable to run away, stuck in the zombie's grip. The zombie screeched at Sheriff, its grip tightening. Sheriff was in distress as the zombie clung onto him. Sheriff screamed in panic, trying to break free from the zombie's hold. Samshik and the others were panicked, seeing Sheriff in trouble.